And welcome, everybody, to the Intellicheck podcast. This is the show where we delve into the news and issues around identity verification, identity fraud, and the tools needed to combat it. With us this week on a special episode is Jonathan Robbins, CTO of Intellicheck, to talk about baseball. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This is great. So, we found out that Jonathan has done some work for a team in Major League Baseball. And the team thought this was a great topic to discuss because it does have a tie to Intellicheck's work. So, Jonathan, first, tell us about it's very exciting. Tell us about your work with Major League Baseball.
All right. So back in 2012, I sold a business and tried to retire. And I didn't really have a lot of fun playing golf every day. So I decided to go back to work. And I didn't really want to be an executive or manager or something. So my wife happened to see a job being advertised with the Chicago Cubs to come in and do some work in their analytics department, basically writing software and doing analytics. And I applied for the job, talked my way in, and started working for the Cubs for a few years. It was a great experience, just learning how to apply data to every decision that you could possibly make in a business.
So that's fascinating. So, I mean, as we had sort of gone back and forth before this, you had sort of you were sort of working as a data scientist and we're actually researching player characteristics and what makes them successful. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I had a really great experience here working with some really smart data scientists and analysts. They were phenomenal. I can't hold a candle to these guys. They were so good. But they were doing a ton of research on what makes a player good and what correlates to success at the major league level. So you can imagine they're having to look at a young person, even 16 years old, to make a decision if there's somebody they want to maybe commit to. So the draft is one thing and spending money in the draft, but then developing that player to get them on the field is very expensive, time consuming, and you need to really minimize your losses and ensure success. So there was a ton of research going on there to try to figure out how can we analyze a player and figure out what would make them successful at the major league level. So we can talk about some of those things and some of the stuff that I witnessed, see what happened. And there was a lot of research around trying to figure out how we can look at some characteristic of a player, something that would correlate to success at the major league level without having to look at that player for many years. They needed to make quick decisions. They needed to look at small sample sizes of data and what could they use as a small sample size that would correlate to success in the major leagues. So not to give away any secrets or anything that they might do, it's pretty well known these days. The time when I was there was pretty new. We were looking at the characteristics of a pitcher, and it really boiled down to how hard they could throw and how accurate. But spin rate was a huge capacity, and I don't a component of that. And it wasn't just how the ball spun; it was usable spin is what they were looking for. The reason being is that when you hit a ball with a bat, and if it's spinning really hard, it's going to either go straight up in the air or straight down to the ground if you don't really make really solid contact and really squared up contact with a certain velocity. If you don't, it's pretty easy out, is the whole idea. So there was a lot of research done on that using tons of data over the years, going back to the 1800s, trying to analyze players and what small sample size could you use that would correlate to success in the future. So that way they could then focus the attention on players that the scouts should be watching, not every player on the planet, but really focus in on those players to either draft or to make trades for. And that's where it really boiled down to. The Cubs have had great success if you look at how they work with their bullpen. When they go out and find pitchers, they're not paying huge amounts of money. They're usually looking for somebody who's had good experience in the past that maybe they can fix some characteristics of and help them become successful again. It works really well for them. It doesn't cost a lot of money in the scheme of things.
So the really interesting thing is, what is this sort of shibboleth, the one thing that sort of determines a good player based on small sample size at a particular time? But you did a ton of research to go into figuring out which of those attributes was most useful.
Correct. There's a ton of modeling that went on, massive machine learning models that were put together to really analyze large amounts of data. So we gathered data from all these sources, a lot of different sources, whether it was players from overseas, in the U.S., college players, even high school players.
Mm-hmm.
It was all mashed together in a huge database that was then run through these models that could take days to run. And it would start ranking the players that they should be watching or looking for and valuing them and correlating them to say these are the ones that look like they'd have the most success that we should be targeting. So if you really think about it, that problem that we were solving in baseball, or very baseball related, applies to pretty much any commercial business.
Mhm.
The same things that we see.
Interesting. It reminds me before we sort of I want to follow that thread, but
Yeah,
before we
sure.
get there, this reminds me of the old IBM programmer test because the test you would take was not to get all the answers right, but to get the same kind of answers as people who they thought were successful.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so sort of that's the sort of key thing. So it's more pattern matching than it is making sure they're perfect.
Yeah, I'll tell you the other characteristic on the hitter side. I talked about how the spin of the ball makes it really hard to hit a good shot. To counteract spin, it's how hard you hit the ball. The harder you
Mhm,
hit it, the farther, the more likely it's going to go straight and not go straight up or straight down.
mhm,
So that was a lot of research was done on that as well to look for, well, what metric can we look at for somebody who hits the ball well. Batting average is a statistic that you have to look at for a long time to really get a sense of how
mhm,
somebody's going to play, and it doesn't always correlate to the major leagues if you're looking at a batted average in a minor league setting.
mhm,
But they did discover that the common characteristics from good hitters was bat speed, how fast they could swing that bat through the strike zone.
mhm,
So they started doing a ton of research on that and found that that was a good thing you should be looking for. And you could use a small sample size. You could look at as somebody played in a tournament for a weekend, see
mhm.
how fast they're swinging the bat, and get a sense that this is probably somebody who might be somebody we want to pay attention to.
Fascinating. What I love about the game these days is you look at the just wealth of data that you get, not just OBP, but also the sort of rotation of the ball, and they are starting to actually publish bat speeds,
Yeah.
in real time, which just I think makes the game a heck of a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, some people will that really get into baseball. I feel become data nerds, and they're really tracking the data. That's probably the reason they get so excited about it, whether it's just for fun or for gambling or whatever.
Sure.
The data is really what makes it really super interesting, I think.
So tie this in. You sort of hinted at it earlier. Tie this into the work that Intellicheck does and how you take that particular skill to get to identity verification, identity fraud, and those kind of things.
Sure. So one of the common characteristics, like I said before, you pretty much the way you make these decisions, using a lot of data to help you drive your decisions and come up with metrics that you need to track. There's a common theme to those, and that you have to be able to manage a mountain of data, a lot of data,
Mhm,
and be able to query it very effectively and very quickly using different techniques than people are used to. So the foundation of what we did in baseball is the exact same foundation that we applied here at Intellicheck because we're trying to pull in as much data as we can.
mhm,
We already gather a lot of data from all the work we do, verifying over 100 million IDs a year. But then also augmenting that with outside data, we just needed an infrastructure where we could consume that data and then query it very quickly. And I'm talking about millisecond queries over hundreds of millions of records.
mhm,
So that's the foundation there. The second piece is now because you have all this data and now we build all these machine learning models that are looking for things that we might not spot with the human mind. And that's a lot of what we did in the baseball world. We're applying those same techniques here in IntelliCheck that's helping us figure out, is this a stolen ID? Is this somebody who's printed something? Try to fake an ID that's
mhm,
of a valid ID, that sort of thing. That we can use a lot of data now to help us drive those decisions. Build models that can use small amounts of data to predict what's going on with an ID. That's really what it boils down to. Is as complex as what we're doing at the baseline. That's it.
sure.
We're just using a lot of data and models that have been trained on that data to spot trends that you might not see with the human eye.
Fascinating. So that's literally how we tie baseball back to Intellicheck and how they're doing an amazing job at determining fraud, identity verification, and so on.
Correct. So I pretty much mirrored what I was doing and learned a lot from working with those data science and analysts in baseball and the
Hmm.
technology we deployed. I pretty much mirrored that here at IntelliCheck and using the same
Hmm.
kinds of things. I even recruited some people out of the baseball world to come in and help with this because it's similar kind of
Hmm.
problems. And what we're doing is building models, gathering data, cleansing that data, and making it so that we can then visualize things that we normally wouldn't see unless you had a mountain of data and you had these models that would point out things that you weren't really looking for. You may not have thought to look
Hmm.
for. It's pretty amazing.
It is. We're happy to have you back at any time. That's all the time we have today. But we should find out ways to sort of follow up with this very much. So, my guest today on the Intellicheck podcast has been Jonathan Robbins, the CTO of Intellicheck. And we've been discussing baseball analytics and Intellicheck. Thank you, Jonathan.
Hey, thanks very much for having me.
All right, folks, thanks for listening to the Intellicheck podcast. We will see you next time and be safe out there.